Hello and welcome to Global Eye. Not just what you need to know, but what you want to know. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and let's take a look at tonight's headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump is thrashing European leaders in a searing set of moves that threaten to pull the bloc apart altogether. We'll discuss whether his criticism will ultimately forge a stronger Europe or upend the world order as we know it. And a horrifying terror attack on a Hanukkah celebration in Australia has left at least 11 people dead and almost 30 wounded. We have the details. Plus, Pakistan has launched its final nationwide polio drive for 2025, but healthcare workers are concerned for their lives. We'll tell you why. Before all of that, let's take a look into the lens behind the headlines of some recent stories that you might have missed. Now, what started as a routine exam review at an Ivy League college in the U.S. has turned into absolute chaos. A manhunt is now underway after a mass shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island left 2 students dead and 9 others injured. It happened on Saturday afternoon, just after 4 p.m. inside a classroom where students had gathered to prepare for finals. Police say that a gunman walked in, shouted something, and then opened fire. The Ivy League campus was immediately locked down. Students were told to shelter in place. That's now been lifted, and a person of interest is now in custody. But the suspect, the weapon, and a possible motive remain unclear. Most of the injured are in stable condition, though. But the shaken campus is waiting for answers. And the White House is promising payback tonight. President Donald Trump says there will be very serious retaliation after 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian interpreter were killed in an ISIS ambush in Syria. The attack happened on Saturday and was allegedly carried out by a lone ISIS gunman. Now, 3 other Americans were wounded. The Pentagon says the attacker was later killed by partner forces.
Syria, by the way, was fighting along with us. The new president of Syria is, as they told me, and I'm not surprised, he's devastated by what happened. This was an ISIS attack on us and Syria. And again, we mourn the loss and we pray for them and their parents and their loved ones. Very, very sad. We will retaliate. Thank you very much.
Well, Trump is warning that anyone who targets Americans will be hunted down. The soldiers were members of the Iowa National Guard and were deployed as part of the U.S. mission to defeat ISIS. Now, after a month of calm, the boats are back. Migrants were pictured arriving in Dover in the United Kingdom this weekend, ending the longest stretch without small boat crossings in 7 years. Photos show dozens of people in life jackets brought ashore by the border force after 4 weeks with no arrivals at all, something officials say was largely due to rough winter weather. Now, so far this year, nearly 40,000 people have crossed the channel, one of the highest totals on record, and more than 187,000 since tracking began in 2018. The British government says it's stepping up enforcement removals and returns to France, but admits that those measures won't have an immediate impact. It's important to note that in November, the British Home Secretary announced major asylum changes, including making refugee status in the UK temporary and subject to review every 30 months, and also sending refugees home if their country is deemed safe. After years behind bars, dozens of political prisoners in Belarus are finally free thanks to a high-stakes deal with Washington. Belarus has released 123 prisoners, including prominent opposition activist Maria Kolesnikova and Nobel Peace Prize winner Ales Bialyatsky. This after the U.S. agreed to lift sanctions on potash, which is a key Belarusian export. Now, the move follows rare talks in Minsk with President Trump's special envoy, marking a major shift in U.S. policy toward the authoritarian state. Belarus's exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya is welcoming the releases, but she warns the fight isn't over.
Of course, there are still hundreds of people behind the bars, and we have to release all of them. But it's the process of negotiation. Now, the team of the Verita was released, and hopefully they will join our movement, and we will become stronger. Of course, we will see what strategy they might have.
Tonight, families are celebrating freedom while many more are still waiting. And just days after a White House peace deal, fighting is flaring up again in eastern Congo, and Washington is pointing the finger at Rwanda. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that Rwanda's actions are a clear violation of the agreement brokered by President Trump last week, warning that the U.S. will take action to make sure promises are kept. The warning comes as the M23 rebel group claims it's captured the key city of Uvira, an offensive the U.S. and Europe say is backed by Rwanda despite Kigali's denials. The timing has experts baffled, coming just as leaders were publicly celebrating the peace deal in Washington. Now, this is just a devastating story. A sperm donor has put hundreds of kids across Europe at serious risk. He helped to conceive nearly 200 children, but he unknowingly carried a cancer-causing mutation. The donations went through Denmark's European Sperm Bank. They were used by 67 clinics in 14 countries over the course of 17 years. But the problem, well, the mutation hits the TP53 gene, which normally protects against cancer. So the babies that were born with that gene now face a 90% lifetime risk of serious cancers, from leukemia to bone tumors to breast cancer. At least 23 kids are confirmed to have this mutation at this point. 10 of them already have cancer. Experts now want to limit how many families a single donor can help. As one geneticist put it, not every man should have 75 kids across Europe. And it looks like John Cena has officially hung up his boots. The WWE legend wrapped up a year-long retirement tour from wrestling with one final match at Saturday night's main event in front of over 19,000 fans in Washington, D.C. Now, Cena's a 17-time champion, but he lost to his opponent, Gunther, tapping out for the first time in 21 years. That's right. The guy who has not tapped since 2004 finally had to throw in the towel. He tried all his signature moves, the five-knuckle shuffle, the attitude adjustment, but Gunther's sleeper hold was just too much. And after breaking it a few times, Cena just looked into the camera, gave a small smile, and tapped out. Guess it was a good run. And the man accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk has made his first in-person court appearance. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson showed up in court with wrist and ankle restraints, dressed in a shirt and tie, and even smiled at family in the front row. He hasn't entered a plea yet, but he's facing serious charges, including aggravated murder, and he could get the death penalty if convicted. The hearing also focused on how much the media can actually cover. Robinson's lawyers wanted cameras out because they're worried about a fair trial, but Kirk's or you could say lawyer and his news organizations have also pushed for transparency, and the judge has so far allowed some coverage while still protecting certain details. The judge is now taking his time to make decisions on sealed recordings and transcripts, saying he wants to do it right, with the next in-person hearing scheduled for January 16th. And new photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate are out, and they are turning heads. Democratic lawmakers released nearly 100 more images showing Epstein at his home with some high-profile figures, including Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, and Steve Bannon. Most of the photos have been seen before, and none show illegal activity, but they give a closer look at Epstein's world and the powerful people who were around him. Trump does appear in a few pictures, including one with a model at a Victoria's Secret party in 1997. Some images also show women whose faces have been redacted. The White House is calling the release a Democratic hoax. They say it's just another attempt to distract from Trump's accomplishments. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is gearing up to publish all Epstein-related documents next week, so more details could be coming soon. And infamous porn star Bonnie Blue has been kicked out of Indonesia. Tia Billinger, that is her real name, was one of 34 people who was detained when police raided a Bali production studio. Authorities say no pornographic material was found. The 26-year-old has since been cleared of breaking the country's strict anti-porn laws, but she got into trouble for working on a tourist visa. As a result of that, she was fined just $12 for a minor traffic violation, but she isn't allowed back to Indonesia for a decade. Oh, well, we're going to have a little soundbite here. I guess we don't. Bottom line. Oh, do we have him? Oh, here he is.
Will not damage Bali image because there is no a new criminal court imposed against her. according to a new criminal code, this law bans extramarital sex and cohabitation. But this new criminal code will not impose against foreign tourists who come to Indonesia.
Well, Bonnie Blue, who is known for her controversial sex videos like sleeping with over 1,000 men in 12 hours, has been under scrutiny before during her travels, especially in Bali and Australia, for similar projects. And now we reach the summit. All right, before we turn to our panel, Donald Trump's latest stance on Europe and NATO is once again dominating headlines. Let's take a look at what he had to say, and here's more on that story.
Donald Trump's approach to Europe and NATO has once again put transatlantic relations on edge. From the campaign trail to private diplomacy, Trump has revived a familiar charge that Europe is economically complacent, militarily weak, and dependent on U.S. protection without paying its fair share. His message is blunt. Europe must stand on its own feet or risk losing Washington's umbrella. Trump's rhetoric has unsettled traditional allies, but energized part of Europe's political right. Across the continent, nationalist and Eurosceptic parties have echoed his criticisms of Brussels and NATO. As leaders scramble to respond, some officials argue Trump is forcing a long overdue reckoning on defense spending and strategic autonomy. Others see something more destabilizing: a president willing to weaponize uncertainty and treat alliances as transactional. The result is a paradox. Trump says he wants a strong Europe, yet his tactics of public threats, ambiguous commitments, and praise for nationalist movements may be accelerating fragmentation inside the EU while eroding trust in American leadership. European capitals are now debating faster rearmament, deeper defense integration, and a future where U.S. guarantees can no longer be taken for granted. Is Trump right that Europe has freeloaded and grown strategically weak? Can the EU realistically support itself under an unpredictable White House? And is Trump's pressure campaign meant to forge a stronger, more independent Europe, or to pull the bloc apart altogether?
All right, let's meet our panel. Joining us now is retired U.S. Navy Captain Gary Tabach. He's a former chief of staff of NATO in Moscow. We also have Joel Shalit with us, the editor-in-chief of The Battleground, and our very own I-24 News senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. Okay, so we're going to start with a quick fire round. Each of our guests are going to have 30 seconds to respond to my first question. Are you ready? Is Trump right that Europe has freeloaded and grown strategically weak? Joel, take it away.
Yes, in so many words, the European Union member states that are part of NATO have relied too much on the United States for too long for security purposes.
All right. Gary, what is your take on this?
Yes, absolutely. And President Trump has spoken about it to the European Union and to NATO about 6 years ago when he was saying, listen, you want us to pay to protect you from this KGB thug that is in your neighborhood. Meanwhile, you're not paying your dues into the NATO and you're freeloading on us, just like the United Nations.
Owen, I'm interested to hear what you have to say to this question.
Agree with both of them on that, Natasha. But on the broader question of what Trump has said, look, on the narrower point on migration, when he's taking on the Europeans, he's wrong, or at least wrong to be using that on a foreign policy level against Europe rather than leaving it up to their own voters and their own parliaments. But on the wider level, as usual, Trump is right that just because it's important to have a transatlantic relationship doesn't mean it's important to have it at all costs. And Trump is right to make demands of the Europeans on a range of issues, especially on the issues that are really important to the U.S. geopolitically and economically.
All right, we are now going to turn to our open panel. That means that each of our panelists have the freedom to interact. You can speak your mind, say whatever you have on, to say. But let's start with the next question. Actually, first I want to ask, do either of you want to respond to one another? Joel?
To pick up from what Owen just said, I think the major danger of Trump's criticisms of a lack of European investment in defense have to do with coupling it with a critique of civilizational decline in the EU. The European Union and the European Union member states have been very loyal to the United States over the decades and have cooperated with the US extensively on security issues. They simply haven't invested the same way the United States has. And that's a big difference. I mean, Trump, in my opinion, has declared ideological war and sued for ideological divorce from the EU. But that's neither here nor there. That's just a shout out to far right European parties. It has nothing to do with empowering Europe to take defense matters vis-a-vis Ukraine into its own hands.
Oh, and I see you nodding there. You have something you want to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, to continue on these points, look, Natasha, I don't think the U.S. really has a dog in the fight on how many migrants from Muslim countries or otherwise the Europeans decide to admit or not admit. That's up to their own voters, up to their own parliaments. Donald Trump can have his own opinions about it, but it's not really an American national interest. But there are some things that are. Of course, the issue of defense spending. And there, Donald Trump has a lot to be proud of. He's a real achievement, it seems, where his predecessors talked a good game but didn't actually get to the finish line the way he seems to have gotten in terms of getting NATO members to spend 5% of their GDP potentially on defense. But there are also other issues. Trade, where Trump has tried and in large case succeeded to drive a hard bargain. And of course, the issue of China, where it's going to be more important for the United States to keep Europe on its side. But maybe to do that, there has to be a give and take on other issues. Point being, Natasha, that Trump is right to press the Europeans to get them to do more, to align themselves with what's important to the United States rather than giving the kind of blank check that would have been appropriate in 1945 when Europe was destroyed, but doesn't make a lot of sense in 2025 when Europe's really back on its feet and has been for a long time. But now there is a point where the U.S. has to drive a hard bargain, but not on migration. That's a distraction. There are some other issues that are going to be a lot more important to the U.S. moving forward.
I want to focus on migration shortly. Sorry, I heard that somebody wanted to speak.
Well, the thing is, I think that Europeans, Israelis, and Ukrainians have to remember that President Trump is the president of the United States, not of Europe or Israel or Ukraine. Europe right now has a major war going on right in their backyard. And the United States has been supporting the Ukraine for the last 4 years. And President Trump says, listen, Europe has to engage in this. We can't pay and fight for you all the time. So Europeans agreed to pay for the arms that will be transferred to Ukrainians who are really bleeding out to this KGB thug. And Europeans are not really pulling their weight. They're not paying for it. And again, American citizens are saying, listen, you won this election on saying that you're going to make America great again. And I can assure you that many Americans think that if America is great again, then Europe is going to be great again, and Ukraine will be great again. But the thing is, Europe is concentrating on bringing foreign army that's invading them, that is draining, and they're paying for it for this migration, as you were saying. That is a foreign body. Those are not people in Europe who will fight for Europe, and this is a concern for the United States that we're not willing to pay for it any longer. We have our own problems.
You know, it's important to note that we're seeing a lot of European leaders who are very angry about Trump's commentary. Do you think that he is ultimately being critical because he wants what is best for Europe? Is this an effective strategy, the perhaps wording of what he is saying in terms of Europe's performance as of late? Gary?
Yeah, listen, we're in the United States, we're very tired of this political correctness that President Trump said this, President Trump said that. It almost becomes a joke about it, especially when it is misinterpreted. It's taken out of context. For instance, this picture that is circulating everywhere, including in your channel, where Trump is standing with women whose faces are blocked out. This is already a very famous picture that's been in the United States forever. It's a beauty pageant that Trump took place. How is it related to Epstein files and all this stuff? But yet that's going to be spread. And I think in the United States, many people already realized that there is a fight between what we call globalists and capitalists. Globalists are represented, we can say Soros or whatever. There is media, 90% of media in Europe and the United States is to the left, and they're fighting Trump. They're not fighting Maduro. They're not fighting Al-Qaeda. They're not fighting Putin. They're fighting Trump. And there's this capitalist world that is trying to withstand that, which is represented by Trump. And pretty much, I think it is very clear that there are only two problems in the world, and if we get rid of them, everything is going to be hunky-dory. It's Trump and Israel.
Joel, what is your take on this? Do you think that Trump is being critical because he wants the best for Europe, or is this part of a different strategy, perhaps?
I don't think Trump has Europe's best interests at heart at all. He's performing much like American presidents, particularly Republican presidents, have over the years in intervening in European affairs. For example, we just observed the anniversary of the Piazza Fontana bombing in Milano, here in Italy, in 1969, which dozens of people, if I remember correctly, were killed by far-right terrorists associated with Italy's fascist movement. And in all of the court briefings about the incident, some of which remained ongoing until very recently, there was repeat allegations of U.S. intelligence support for the attacks because they were meant as part of a broader strategy to fight communism in Italy. The Americans have always taken a very proactive role in trying to maintain a certain kind of political character for Europe. That was the Kissinger era. Now we have Trump. And this is just another version of the same. What's different and more threatening, I think, about what Trump's trying to do now is, I could cite there was an article in Politico a week ago about the U.S. getting involved in European elections and trying to dictate their outcomes, according to President Trump's most recent initiative. And I think that this is going to be our version of the kind of intervention in European politics we saw during the Cold War under administrations like Nixon's.
Obviously, I see, Owen, you're ready to respond to this. How do you think that Trump's criticisms resonate with the European public versus political elites?
Look, Natasha, I think Trump can get things that are important to the United States, or he can talk about migration. I don't think he can do both, and I'll tell you why. Because to get the things that are important for the United States, like the defense spending, which he's already gotten, although the Europeans actually have to make good on their pledge. They've made the pledge. Now they actually have to come up with the money. And also to get what he wants on trade in the long run, to get what he wants on China in the long run. He needs to give the Europeans sticks, and he knows how to use those, and that has to be said to his credit. But he also knows how to take out the carrots. And the carrots are that the United States is going to be reliable for Europe. And if Trump comes in and he starts talking about migration over the head of at least parts of Europe and part of the European leadership and part of the European public. Yes, it's true the far right is gaining in popularity, but there are a lot of people who don't like the far right and aren't with them. And the more that Donald Trump makes the United States look unreliable, the harder it is for him to be able to get Europe to make promises in the long term that are really important to the United States and its future geopolitically. Nothing more important than China. And they're an economic bloc like the European Union. It's going to be very important. Now, of course, the Europeans have their own reasons for being hawkish on trade with China, and we've seen that over the last few weeks, especially. But even so, Trump is going to want European cooperation on a range of issues. He's not going to get it if he shows the United States not to be reliable. And talking about migration is one sure way to get the United States to seem erratic and not reliable.
Well, I'll argue that because, again, if you look from a point of view from the United States, Europe does not have interests of Europe from our point of view in the beginning, and they want for us to have.
Gary, let me just come in for a second. I want to ask you I want to ask you a very specific question.
I wasn't finished. Why
does the United States have an interest in how many migrants Germany admits into its country? Why does the United States care? Why is it an American national interest how many migrants, or for that matter, let's say it explicitly, how many Muslims do live in Munich or don't?
Well, you clearly don't want to hear what I want to say, so
let me hear. Go for it.
Well, I wasn't finished with my first point, so you interrupted me. But it is a typical European way of approaching Americans, because we owe you something. We don't know what we owe you, but we clearly owe you, and we owe you explanations. We owe you apologies. We owe you other things. But I'll answer your question. The reason is because we're supposed to fight this evil second Hitler that's raising his head in your backyard, in Europe, and we're paying a lot of money. $350 billion was invested in it by American citizens and by American taxpayers. But Europe is not pulling its own weight. Europe is spending money on those immigrants rather than spending money on building their war machine, building their army, building their military that is capable of fighting off of it. And instead, they're investing it in immigrants. And we're saying, okay, if you want to invest in that, go ahead. We're not stopping you, but don't expect us to do anything about it. Don't expect us to fight your wars.
All right. Well, we have time for a quick response on that, OMB. We have to go out for a commercial break.
Yeah, I mean, it seems hard for me to believe that that's the problem, that that's the reason that the Europeans weren't spending on debate long before migration. Long before 2015, this was an issue.
Right, now it's an issue before that. But what you should believe is in God and not believe in what you believe in. What you believe in is not a factual statement. This is what I'm saying to you is what's on our news and why American people are upset about it. And they're saying that you used to call President Trump isolationist, that he was going to only worry about the United States. But now you're blaming him that he's not an isolationist, that he is involved in all of those things that are going around the world. So Trump cannot be right. Trump cannot be right no matter what he does. He's going to be blamed for everything.
Okay, we're going out for a quick commercial break, but stick with us. We're going to continue this discussion soon.
Are you still cleaning your floors with a broom and dustpan?
Or down on your hands and knees with paper towels?
Or dragging out your big, heavy vacuum?
Forget about it! Georgia Mary Beth back with another incredible invention.
It's the Zippy Sweeper, the rechargeable cordless sweeper that's lightweight and compact. With an advanced triangular design that gets into corners and features 360-degree omnidirectional cleaning.
It cleans any mess on carpets, hard floors, even long baseboards, in any direction.
Watch this. It cleans dirt and dust.
All of her hair.
And his trail of messy little crumbs.
It cleans up wet vegetables.
How about this confetti on the carpet?
How about this broken glass? The secret? Advanced tri-brush technology. There's a separate brush on each side of the unique triangular head. No matter which way you move the triangular cleaning head, the 3 high-speed spinning brushes will sweep every speck from your floor right into the built-in quick-release dirt tray.
Ordinary vacuums can miss messes in corners, but not the Zippy Sweeper. Its triangular head and built-in spinning edge brush pull the dirt out of corners where vacuums miss. With its swiveling head and super low profile design, you can clean under your furniture without moving it.
The Zippy cordless sweeper is 5 times lighter than an average vacuum cleaner, so it's great for cleaning the stairs. Zip into the future with Zippy Sweeper.
Call or go online and get the incredible Zippy Sweeper for just 2 payments of $59.99. But wait, if you call or go online now, we will make a payment for you. That's right. It's just 1 payment of $59.99, and that's not all. Call now and you can get a second Zippy Sweeper for 50% off, plus free shipping. But you have to call now.
Call 1-800-354-1904. That's 1-800-354-1904. Don't wait, call now.
עוד יותר, כן, עוד יותר, עוד יותר, כן. מזל טוב.
אתה הכי טוב. עוד יותר טוב.
אלבר, רק את הטוב. ועוד הנפקה מוצלחת לחברת ההייטק הישראלית.
אולי יצאו יותר טוב, משה.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Every week, we take you on a journey to meet the people shaping tomorrow, right here at the heart of Startup Nation. Health, culture, mobility, agriculture. Innovation isn't just a buzzword here. Innovation is everywhere. Join us every week to go behind the scenes of innovation made here in Israel.
Every Tuesday on I-24 News.
And we are back on Global. I am Natasha Kirchek, and thanks for sticking with us. Now, the European Union's plan to freeze and maybe even use Russian state assets is sparking outrage amongst some European leaders. Have a listen.
Brussels are crossing the Rubicon today. Today at noon, a written vote will begin that causes irreparable damages to the Union. The subject of the vote is the frozen Russian asset, on which the EU member states have voted every 6 months, and the decision was made unanimously. With today's procedure, the requirement for unanimity will be lifted by the people of Brussels with a stroke of a pen. It's obviously illegal. With today's decision in the European Union, the rule of law will be abolished, and European leaders will place themselves above the rules.
All right, we're going to turn back to our panelists tonight. We have retired U.S. Navy Captain Gary Tabach with us, the former chief of staff of NATO in Moscow. We have Joel Shalit with us, the editor-in-chief of The Battleground, and our very own senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. All right, remember, we're going to give each of you 30 seconds right now to give a quick answer to one of our fire rounds. This question is our next one. Is Orban right when he says that the EU is overstepping and could mess up Europe's reputation as a safe place for money? Joel?
Only if you're speaking on behalf of the Russians do you take such a position. The EU decision was legal. It was extensively vetted, and a majority, 27, I believe, member states voted on its behalf. So voted to support the resolution freezing Russian assets. So Orban is wrong.
All right, Gary, what's your take?
Well, trust me, I'm the one that would love to see that happen, and that would be a great thing to do. But I think things should be stay within the legal boundaries, and it should be decided by the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, by international lawyers, because you can't just come in and take something because you think these people are criminals or this guy is a bad guy, and just take the something that he lent you to hold for him. I think that is not right. I mean, and again, I'm a product of collective farms in the Soviet. Every time you have a collective farm like NATO, European Union, and so forth, this is what happens. All of a sudden, they think they're above the law, and they know what's right and what's wrong, and they can do those things. For instance, one of the things that upsets a lot of people in the United States now is the fine that European Union smacked on Musk. What is 120 or 140 million dollars? But nobody can understand what is it that he's fined for, just because he's saying things that doesn't like, or his platform is not doing something. Nobody could give a clear explanation to it by any lawyers or any means. But European Union, their body decided, and that's it. That's the law.
All right, Owen, your 30 seconds now.
It's a calculated risk, Natasha. Look, the Europeans themselves aren't sure this is going to work. That's why all the governments have had to give ironclad guarantees to Belgium to get on board with this, because the Belgians are worried about that a judgment in Russia could be used against them in Belgium, that their own courts won't stand by them. That's how worried the Europeans are. But look, we're almost 4 years into this war. 4 years. We were talking before about how the Europeans need to step up and give the Ukrainians money. Okay, this is a way for them to do it, to get this money, to use as collateral for a loan for Ukraine, to be able to get this through, and ultimately, potentially, to have the Russians pay the Ukrainians this money as part of reparations. The Europeans are coming at this reluctantly, but almost 4 years into this war, this is a lot of money, and this is the rabbit that just needs to be pulled out of the hat.
All right, we're going to turn now to open panel, meaning that you'll have the chance to speak your mind. Let us know what you think. I see already that there was a response that one of you had to Owen. No? I misheard that. Okay. So, we were talking about Trump and his criticisms of Europe. Are they encouraging infighting within the bloc, especially in this specific scenario? Is this ultimately good for the United States, the potential that the bloc could break up?
Right now, opinion polls are firmly against Trump. He's been met with massive disapproval in the polling that I've read, leading a number of polls to conclude that Trump is a threat to Europe. How populist and far-right parties in the EU regard this is probably to ignore what the polls are saying and celebrate the fact that Trump is on their side, and they can take that and they can use that with their base to further inspire them and charge them up to take more initiatives to erode both the EU itself and democratic norms within their own national states.
Gary, what's your take?
Well, polls are polls. The same polls said that Trump is not going to win the first time, the second time, and the third time that he was going to lose. Also, Gallup poll, which is very much respected in Europe, saying that most of the Americans say that the most not trusted people are journalists. So I don't really see how polls are saying. But again, I'm a product of a collective farm of the Soviet Union. Every time you have that, it doesn't work. There is a bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy. Decisions are never made, just like the United Nations. And I tell you, those of us who served, and I've served in the United Nations and I've served in the NATO, and among ourselves, we call United Nations useless nobodies and NATO no action talk only. That is not me saying this. This is what it is with the people who are inside of those organizations. They're large, they're bureaucratic, and they have never resolved anything. They have never prevented anything. And I think in Israel, it is people know very well.
Owen, is this ultimately good for the United States, the potential that the bloc could break up?
Well, look, I'm going to push back against Joel here. Joel, to quote a good Italian, I know you're in Italy, Niccolo Machiavelli, Trump might not be loved, but he's feared. Look, he may not do well in polling among Europeans, and he may be pitting leaders against each other on the issue of migration. But again, the issues that are really important for the United States in terms of its interests, in terms of its world standing, in terms of achieving its actual bare knuckles goals on defense spending, on trade, potentially also in China, Donald Trump has brought European leaders around to him because they understood that he was really coming at them with real leverage. Of course, those gains might be fragile. They might be eroded by Donald Trump talking about migration and showing that the United States can't be relied on. But Trump has a lot of achievements with Europe. Look, Natasha, I don't think it's good for the United States if the European Union breaks up, but it's also not good for the United States if the Europeans are taking advantage of the United States or taking the transatlantic alliance for granted. There seems to be a kind of halo effect of putting the transatlantic relationship on a pedestal among establishments over the last few decades. And Donald Trump has broken that and basically said, yes, the relationship's important, but it's also important that you do things that are important to us. As a principle that's essential for the United States moving forward, now the question is, how do you take that forward and actually focus on things that are really important to you? Tying Europeans standing up for defense with standing with the Europeans against Russia and Ukraine. And there has been some evidence of some linkage to that in the last few months. And having the Europeans come around to the United States, or having the United States be more attentive maybe to the Europeans on trade in exchange for the Europeans, for example, being more attentive to the United States on China.
Where should...
Owen,
go ahead. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the United States helped set what became the Ukraine war rolling when George Bush in 2005 declared his support for the idea of Ukraine joining NATO. And that initiative was strongly supported at the time by Hungary, for example. There was a meeting in Budapest where all of this was affirmed. And Europe tagged along. The Americans took the initiative and the Europeans followed suit. So, I mean, I think the U.S. in many ways owns the Ukraine conflict in unique ways that the Europeans don't. That's not to say that Europe didn't have its role in, supporting Euromaidan and the subsequent destabilization of the country in 2014, for example. But I think that it's really important, speaking from the European side, to clarify what Donald Trump's rights are to dictate the political order of Europe to Europeans. Donald Trump was not elected in Europe. Donald Trump was elected in the United States. He should stay there. And this is regarded in many quarters, including center-right quarters. You should talk to the former National Front, the Rassemblement National in France. They hate what Trump is doing, and they're on the very far right. There's an element of chutzpah here that is absolutely intolerable from a democratic point of view. And so it's hard to hear what good the Americans do at this level when so much of it is distinctly dictatorial.
All right, Gary, final comments.
Right. This is Trump's fault when Vice President Biden calls Ukrainian president acting and saying, give up Crimea. That's Trump's fault. I mean, everything starts with the Trump. But
it's not the same.
Today, right? No, right. It's all not the same. The thing is, you're saying that Trump should stay. You're absolutely correct. Trump was voted by American people and Americans, and he's American president, and he should stay. And this is exactly what we're saying. He should stay in America.
Yeah.
Then why are we Why are you discussing then Trump? If he should stay here, just stop discussing him, stop blaming him for everything, try to help him. And the thing is, that never stops. It's Trump that's fault. But while this war is going on, it started under the President Obama, the hot war with the Crimea, and it continued with the President Biden, both Democratic and the same party people that want to replace the other. It was not Trump. And it was Trump is the only one that's trying to stop this war. Why isn't any of the European leaders take the lead? Take the lead. He's not dictating you anything. Take the lead. But all it is just yap, yap, yap. And at the end, Trump is at fault. No matter what he does, he's at fault. So far, he's the only one that's showing leadership in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, and in South and North Americas. No other leader has taken a lead. And this is, I guess, it's very difficult to understand that he's an American president and he's the one that's taking responsibility for it. And that is why there is a fight. That is why everything is done. No facts at all placed. What has he done that harms Europe or anyone else? So far, he's trying to help everyone. And this is that's unsaid. It's better to talk about those things in a collective way. So if you want him to stay out of it, he'll stay out of it. Don't listen to him. Don't vote for him next time, Europe. But the thing is, you can't get your stuff together. You are actually in Europe are fighting against yourselves. Look what happened today in Australia, with the killings there. Why? You know what happens? It's the same thing happening in Europe. You have people running around with Palestinian flags saying down with Israel, down with the United States. The same thing was happening on our campuses. But as soon as President Trump came in and told those campuses they're not going to be financed by federal money, by taxpayers, that stopped in the United States. In the United States, is those two gunmen were like they are in Europe or they are in Australia now, they wouldn't have been shooting for that long, and they would have never shot that many people, because in Texas, after first shot, they would have been taken down, because our people are armed. Our American people, our citizens are armed, and we can protect ourselves. You guys cannot help yourself. You can't even protect yourself, but you expect Americans to do it. And we've done it. We've done it right. World War I, World War II.
Joel, did you have any last thing that you wanted to say to that?
Yeah.
I thought I had the last word.
You did until we decided that Joel had the right to respond to that long answer.
Right.
I'm an Israeli immigrant who has lived in Germany and Italy for the last 17 years. And far-right governments are not friends to Jews. They tolerate Jews, but they are not our allies. Trump is enfranchising far-right parties in Europe that are anti-Semitic.
You have any examples for Jesus Christ on this? For Jesus Christ, Israel had never had a better friend than Trump. Never. One of the countries that never had a better friend than Trump, and you're putting him in the far right. And I'm an immigrant too in the United States. I was born in the Soviet Union. But it is the most bizarre thing that I've ever heard in my life.
All right.
Trump is
Guys,
not friend
unfortunately, we do have to leave it here. I'm going to have to cut off both of you. I see, Joel, that you want to respond as well, but we do have to move on to our next story.
That's good.
I'd like to thank our panelists so much for joining us. We weren't able to figure out what comes next for Europe, whether it's going to continue to become more unified as a result of Trump's comments, fragmented, or we're going to see a reshaping of the global order entirely. But we'd like to thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
I wonder if TDS is covered by Obamacare. That's not curable.
We're just going to end it right here. All right, let's take a look now to our spotlight stories. All right. Now, our next story is actually in Pakistan. Polio is back on the radar in Pakistan, and health authorities are making a last push for 2025. Starting tomorrow, more than 45 million children under 5 will get polio drops in a week-long nationwide campaign. It comes after Pakistan reported 30 of the world's 39 polio cases this year alone, with just 9 in Afghanistan. Officials say that misinformation, vaccine hesitancy, and even security threats have repeatedly slowed progress. Polio teams, over 400,000 strong, in fact, are going to be going door to door now, urging parents to protect their kids. And the message is clear: to finally wipe out polio, every child needs these vaccines. But healthcare workers still remain concerned about targeted violence against them from militants who believe in conspiracy theories, like the idea that vaccines are part of a Western plot to sterilize Muslims. Well, joining us now is Pakistani journalist Kaswar Klasra, the editor-in-chief of Islamabad Telegraph. What makes Pakistan particularly vulnerable to polio resurgence despite years of vaccination campaigns?
Well, thank you, Vi. Thank you for having me on the show. It is really a good story we are talking about. And let me tell you that Pakistan is going to launch another full wave of polio vaccination. But sadly, Pakistan tends to be one of the countries where polio has not been eradicated. But regarding your question, why the polio vaccination has not been so successful, it has a number of factors as well. In 2011, a fake polio vaccination drive was kicked off by the authorities here, and that served actually the basis for making this polio vaccination contradictory. And still, two big, the provinces, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the Balochistan provinces there, the polio vaccination, even in the past, has not been successful because of the militants' agenda, because of the security concern, and other factors as well. And also, the most sad part of the story is still the majority of the people there in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also the Balochistan province, they're not going to trust the authorities, I mean the polio vaccination drive as well. And another aspect is that the Pakistanis believe, particularly in those two the provinces, that polio vaccination could be something which can hamper the fertilizations of the men's and women, and it could be a Western agenda to cut down the Pakistan's rate of the fertilization and the rate of population as well. So these are different things which have actually added to the miseries of Pakistani government and Pakistani authorities, and that is perhaps the fact that Pakistan has not been able to eradicate polio from across the country.
At this point, how are security threats and misinformation impacting the actual reach of vaccination teams on the ground? How serious is that issue?
Well, unfortunately, there are the security threats to not only to the polio vaccination teams, but overall security situation is not satisfactory, and particularly in two provinces that I told you earlier, that Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also the Balochistan as well. Pakistan have been battling militancy for a long time. The security situation have improved, but it is not improved to the greatest, the action which can also add to the successfulness of this polio vaccination drive. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, with border Afghanistan, they have been every next day we hear the news that of the bomb blasts and other things as well. So militants have still some sort of control over some of the areas. And these are the areas where polio has not been eradicated. Pakistani authorities have been trying to intensify the security for these polio workers. But so far, unfortunately, they have not been able to provide foolproof security, especially to the teams who goes to work in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan provinces. That is perhaps the fact that Pakistan is still trying to battle the polio virus, and still the challenges remains.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. It's obviously really just such a complex issue that Pakistan has been facing in rolling out these polio vaccines, but certainly good news that, this drive is continuing, and hopefully we're going to see less cases in the coming months and years. All right. Now, we're turning to the story that is making headlines across the globe right now. What was meant to mark the start of the Jewish Festival of Light has ended in darkness. Gunmen opened fire at a Hanukkah celebration on Sydney's Bondi Beach this evening in Australia, killing at least 16 people and injuring dozens more in a targeted terrorist attack. Now, guns are quite unusual in Australia, which has one of the lowest gun death rates in the world. That is partly because of a major gun massacre back in 1996, where more than 30 people were killed, leading Australian authorities to enact a wave of gun laws. This is why today's violent terror attack in Bondi Beach at a Hanukkah party carried out by 2 gunmen is putting the issue back at the center of discussion. We know that Israel is now investigating whether Iran was involved in the shooting attack and how those weapons made it into the hands of the perpetrators. And joining us now is our host and correspondent, Nicole Tzedek, with more on this. So what do we know about the suspects so far and how they actually got their hands on these weapons?
Little known at this point. What I can confirm, 2 suspects. One of them has been identified. Naveed Akram, 24 years old, reportedly a resident of Australia, but originally from Pakistan. He, according to reports, once again, had been a construction worker, recently lost his job. But how exactly he got this weapon along with the other unnamed suspect, that's still unclear. I can tell you some of the most recent video already coming out, though, is showing even his family's home in the southwest Sydney suburb being raided. 3 people leaving this home with their hands up. So clearly authorities are investigating. It also was reported that one of these suspects had previously been known by authorities, but wasn't seen as an immediate threat. So now you ask the question of how did they get these guns? Because Australia, it's seen as one of the most safe countries with some of the strictest gun laws.
Right.
And they pride themselves in that as well. So it is very difficult on the one hand for many people to get these guns. According to what we've seen from the video that's been circulating, it looks like these are either shotguns or hunting-style rifles, which are legal under Australian law if they get the right permits, the right documentation, the right safety procedures. Now, how they could have gotten them even perhaps without that is still people either steal these guns. There's also been a recent issue of 3D printing some of these weapons as well. And also, as you mentioned, since 1996, which was the last time that a deadly attack like this has happened in Australia. So it does, on the one hand, show that some of these gun laws do work because it has been some 30 years since the mass shooting of this size. But still, even then, they had this buyback program where some 600,000 of these guns were returned. Not all of them were returned, Natasha. There are still some of these guns circulating in more of these illegal criminal rings.
How is the Australian public actually reacting to this incident? Obviously, we're seeing a focus on the fact that this was clear anti-Semitism in the headlines. But is the focus on this hate attack, or is it more on the issue of gun violence as a whole and the fact that these men were even able to get their hands on weapons to be able to carry out this attack?
I think it goes hand in hand because as it stands right now, the community is still in shock. The death toll is still rising. It's now at 15, at least 16 because of the terrorist that was shot as well. And so the community is still in shock. And I think they have to look at it on the two sides of this. The one, how did this happen in the first place? Clearly something as far as our gold standard of gun laws needs to be rechecked so that something like this can't happen again. Even the safety measures that need to change in order for some of these mass events, concerning event when we know the Jewish community is already under attack. So then the second part of your question, if this is being looked at in more of the anti-Semitic realm, which it should be looked at, I think it is, because it needs to raise those questions because the warning signs have been there for months. We've seen synagogues being torched on fire. We've seen Jewish family homes being graffitied with anti-Semitic statements, cars being also lit on fire and defaced, all in the Jewish community. So the warning signs have been there, Natasha.
Absolutely. And, we were discussing this earlier, whether or not it's even safe anymore to hold public events like this, especially if, there's obviously the one issue of it being a Jewish event that's made public or just an event at all with the lack of security in so many different places around the world.
And I'll tell you right now, just a quick update, the Sydney Jewish organizations, they're saying as it stands right now, all of these Jewish institutions should be closed until further notice. That means kosher restaurants, schools, all of them, just until we have more information.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. Now, before we say goodbye, my friends, we all need to take a breather, especially after that. Now get this, a liquor store in Virginia has just gotten hit by a masked burglar. And no, it wasn't a person with sticky fingers. It was a raccoon. Yes, a trash panda went on a full-on booze bender, smashing bottles of scotch and whiskey, taking down a ceiling tile, and then leaving a mini flood of alcohol on the floor. I know this looks concerning, but he's okay, people. He's okay. Store employees found him passed out in the bathroom like, well, I guess any of us after a wild Saturday night out. Animal control has swooped in. They took him to the shelter. Thankfully, he is sober now. Honestly, you got to give it to the little guy. Let's see that picture again if we can. If you're going to party, go big or go home, right? He is apparently already signed up for a local AA meeting following the post-trauma of having these images shared across the world. All right, my friends, that is it for now from Global Eye. There's that reckless raccoon gone wild for you. A nice image, I guess, to take with you until we see you next time. I'm Natasha Kirchak. This is Global Eye, and we'll see you next week.